Welcome back, everyone. So I just caught up with Gail Simone's run on Uncanny X-Men. Took me a Sunday afternoon, but I did it, and I really liked it. So I'm going to give you a quick recap on where they are before entering into this era of X-Men. I'll give you a recap on a really quick recap on each of these issues, and then where it's kind of heading. There's an X-Men event on the horizon, so stay tuned, and I'll let you know what's going on. So let's set the stage. We are in the post-Krakoa era. So we have kind of two teams settling in. We have Cyclops in Alaska, and we have another group that are kind of loosey-goosey, that are in the wind, and we're catching up with that group right now. Jed MacKay is on the other side. If you want to read more about Cyclops, Beasts, Magneto, Juggernaut, Kid Omega, and a whole other group that's in Alaska, and they're doing kind of their own thing. There is a merging point at some point, and then back to their separate ways. But this is picking up on the other side. So there's just so many X books. I decided to just go with the author that I trust the most, and that's Gail Simone. And they've got my favorite X-Men in this book. So we'll cover that. So let's pick up with number 1. I think this is a great, excellent beginning story. We start out with Dr. Ellis spearheading an effort to tear up the X-Mansion and turn it into a prison for mutants. This follows Rogue with Logan and Gambit looking for purpose, essentially, after Krakoa. They end up fighting a dragon. That dragon ends up being an acolyte of Dormammu and has the Eye of Agamotto. Gambit gets a hold of that, making a deal with it. We see the Hag there killing a Fawn mutant, and that ends up being kind of the looming bad guy in the background. We see there, that's Harvey X. He's a psychic mutant, and he ends up dying there. He was dying anyways. He lets Rogue grab him, and it ends with that new collective of mutants there. So picking up from there, we see learn a little bit more about the new teen's powers. Professor X has an old flame that may or may not be related. You can guess. Jubilee joins the group, and then that Hag there at the end of the first issue ends up being the big baddie. And we find out that Hag is working with Dr. Ellis to fill out her new prison. There she is in all her glory. And maybe that old Hag is an old flame from Xavier's past. So Sarah Gaunt is the name of that person. And there we see Professor X in prison, and the Hag breaking her way in there just to kind of torment him a little bit. Wolverine leaves the group. Nightcrawler joins to help train these new mutants. And we learn a little bit more about these teens: Calico, Deathdream, Ransom, and Jitter. We don't know the full extent of their powers just yet. Jitter can do anything in 1 minute. Deathdream can control ghosts, maybe. Calico is a magical horse girl. And Ransom can't die or something. I don't know. Ends with Wolverine pretty much getting his ass kicked by the Hag, and Rogue, you somehow psychically know that that's happening all the way back in Louisiana. But right now, Rogue and her X-Men are holed up in that Louisiana orphanage that Gambit knew the owner of. So we're calling these guys the Louisiana X-Men. This is totally spearheaded by Rogue. Rogue decides that she's gonna start the X-Men with or without anyone else's help, and she's asked for help. So this issue starts off with Sarah Gaunt saying she's pregnant. Professor X can obviously tell that's a lie. She hates him for denying it. So there's some kind of really deep-rooted hatred for him just for that event that she kind of just made up herself. We see Rogue facing down the Hag and gets her ass kicked as well. Yeah, there's just a lot of trauma with the whole childbirth thing. So within that, she's kind of getting more mutants and calling them her children. She sends over an army over to fight the Louisiana X-Men, and you can see Wolverine ended up being blinded by the Hag. So I don't know what's going on with the Hag's powers, but Logan is taking a long time to recover from his injuries. He was pretty much dying, and he's left blinded. So I'm not sure what's going on there. But we pick up with Rogue completely in shambles. Her wrist is pretty much off her body. And she's remembering her time with Harvey X, colloquially, the child who died by gripping onto her bare skin, but he was dying anyways. There will be more into that later. But essentially, he was not a small level mutant. He actually had very serious mutant powers, and through him, she is able to defeat the Hag using his psychic abilities and healing abilities. You're able to heal up and beat up the Hag. And meanwhile, Gambit uses the Eye of Agamotto to defeat the horde that the Hag sent over to the Louisiana Warriors. And it ends with Rogue dropping the body of the Hag back at the feet of Dr. Ellis. Now on to number 6. The Thing and the X-Men on the cover, though the Thing makes no appearance in this comic, so that's a bit weird. But we are now in the throes of part 2 of the raid on Grey Malkin, kind of setting the stage before with the Dr. Ellis piece. And you get the Louisiana X-Men get 2 members of their party kidnapped by Dr. Ellis. And meanwhile, the teens start school. As you can probably have guessed, they got bullies. And there you can see special appearance from Blob, Siren, and I don't know who that other guy, who are working, I think against their will, for Dr. Ellis to kidnap said X-Men. And you also get a little story with Kurt Nightcrawler saving a little girl's life and the mom being very grateful, which comes to kind of come back later on in a future arc. So number 7 starts with part 2 on the raid on Grey Malkin. So the Louisiana X-Men and the Cyclops X-Men, covered by Jed MacKay's run on the X-Men book, not Uncanny X-Men, both raid on Grey Malkin, as Ellis also kidnapped Beast from Cyclops' team. So Ellis has Calico and Jubilee and Beast from the other side. And we find that Ellis has an Omega level psychic working for her, Philip, or as she calls him, Scurvy. And McKay's X-Men book would fill in some gaps that were very noticeable after this one. Between this one and the next one, they meet Professor X, and that is covered in Jed MacKay's book, which was unfortunate. Issue number 8. So in the middle of Grey Malkin, both teams get frozen in place by that psychic, Scurvy. We learn a little bit more about Dr. Ellis, who was a podcaster and had Scurvy, or Philip, on the podcast, and he was a handsome young man at that point, and she used him to help her. And every time he uses his powers, he kind of gets destroyed himself, and that is a cool ass 2-pager right there. So both of them are frozen by Scurvy. We learned Professor X was in prison there as well. We saw that in issue 1, though it wasn't explicitly stated. And that these two, along with Harvey X, the mutant kid that helped Rogue, are called Avians. They are a race of powerful psychics. And Harvey X died of a brain tumor, something that they all eventually will die from. At least that's what Scurvy tells Professor X. And we learn that Dr. Ellis's inmate X is that last avian. We don't know who that last avian is. There's a showdown at the end. Dr. Ellis says that she'll release the Hag and she'll bomb the Louisiana orphanage if they don't just go. So they get their captured folks. There's a spat between Rogue and Cyclops whether they should stay and fight and try to free Professor X, but Professor X tells them to go. Now, issue 9. This might be my favorite cover right here. So in issue 9, we learn that Trask is back, of course. And he's working with Dr. Ellis. Who could have thought? And he's working with some scientists and experimenting with hound sentinels. So the hound sentinels do use like dog live flesh, but they're largely sentinels. And the AI working them is very buggy, to say the least. And they're trying to sell it to different countries for various purposes, nefarious purposes, of course. But meanwhile, the teens are out at the mall and looking for a good time, just like X-Men, the animated series, that first episode. And the hounds go wild, completely untamed, and they may have killed Death Dream. Well, they definitely killed him right there. But as you know, with comics, we'll see if that death sticks. We come back on issue 10 to the farm in Louisiana by the orphanage, and Nightcrawler is with the orphanage's owner's daughter who's displaying some powers. He's saying he probably wouldn't join back with the X-Men if Rogue were to officially restart it. Jitter decides to use her powers to be an army medic for 1 minute. Ransom helps her patch up Death Dream, who seems to be okay. Wolverine and Nightcrawler join the action and help the teens take down the hounds. We learn a little bit more about Ransom's powers. It's kind of like Sebastian Shaw. He absorbs the power and he dishes it out. And at the end, you see Rogue and Gambit on a date, and something is stalking them. Something with that gross arm is stalking them. So X-Men Xavier's Secret is teasing what's to come with the X-Men crossover event. The first half is Jean and Cyclops on vacation, not being able to cope with the fact that Jean and Phoenix are one and the same and will always be. Professor X on the second half is communicating with some reporters, telling them what actually happened at the end of Krakoa, that he didn't really murder a bunch of humans, innocent people, but rather clones, and that, yeah, there's a bunch of secrets in there that I'm not sure if I'm going to follow this story arc. I guess I have to if I'm going to follow this. All right, dude. So that's pretty much it, man. I really liked it. It really reminded me of like Chris Claremont, Jim Lee era X-Men, some lost mutants who don't know their way, trying to find each other, finding solidarity with each other while, you know, everyone hates mutants. Still that going on. I do think Jed MacKay's run, I wish I did collect both. At the time, though, it's just a lot. It's just so many books. Like, I'll show a screen grab or something of how many X-Men books there are. And then I highly recommend Gail Simone's writing and this book in general. Really big fan. Like, and it's covered my Gambit, Wolverine, Nightcrawler. Those are like my favorite X-Men, so I had to grab this book. So one of the overwhelming things that I kind of spoke to before is that there's just a lot of books, a lot of X-Men books. I'm going to read off a checklist from January 2025, so that was 2 months ago. Deadpool, Wolverine, Magic, Uncanny X-Men, X-Men, Exceptional X-Men, Psylocke, Storm, Wolverine, X-Factor, Phoenix, Mystique, Sentinels, Nyx, Laura Kinney Wolverine, Cable, Love and Chrome, Helverine, Rogue, Savage Land, Sabretooth, The Dead Don't Talk. Like, Jesus, my God. Like, and I'm a completionist. I like to know everything that's going on, but that's just so overwhelming. And then the other thing is like in the raid on Grey Malkin, you definitely missed chunks of important story that was happening in Jed MacKay's X-Men run that wasn't happening in X-Men, Uncanny X-Men on Gail Simone's side. So, like, you don't meet the team seeing Professor X for the first time thinking he was long dead. That didn't happen in Uncanny X-Men, that happened in X-Men. So as far as, like, kind of where this is going, as you can see in the X-Men Xavier's Secret, that is kind of undoing some of the atrocities that happened in Krakoa. If you're into that, you're going to have to collect a bunch of books to understand what's going on. Let me see if I can find it. So you're going to have to read Uncanny X-Men number 11, Nyx number 9, Storm number 6, X-Men number 13, X-Factor number 8, X-Force number 9, Exceptional X-Men number 7, X-Manhunt, Omega number 1. And I know that's like par for the course for large events, but this is large because of how large they've made X-Men. Oh, and yeah, Exceptional X-Men is where Kitty Pryde and, like, I think Emma Frost is over there. And I started reading that, but it's just too many comics. I can't. And, like, kudos to you if you can handle this many comics, but I can't, like, pick one up 2 weeks later, pick up another one without having to reread the other one. And then if you're doing that across 20 different books, that's a lot of context switching that I can't do. It's a lot of rereading for me. So I like reading in Omni format where I get the whole story. I feel nice and complete, hopefully. But yeah, man, this is where we're at. But sorry, rant over. Long story short, Uncanny X-Men, dope. I love it. I really like it. We're going to see if I'm going to continue doing this, if I'm going to try to read X-Manhunt the way it's meant to be read, and we'll go from there. I'm not sure, but I know I'm going to continue reading Aliens vs. Avengers. That's dope as hell. Bug Wars, it looks awesome, but I don't know if I can read another story while reading my Omnis. What else? All New Venom, West Coast Avengers, I'm really liking. There's so many good books out there. That's the great thing, is that there's a lot of great content out there. Same with TV shows. It's that a lot of people, a lot of talent is showing up, but, like, there's just so much. It can be overwhelming. But I dig it. Read it if you can. I highly recommend it. And that's all I got for today. Thanks so much. Like and subscribe. Please, please, please like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much.